Welcome to Living 4D with Paul Chek. Today's guest is Simon Cheng, the founder of the fastest growing tea brand in history, Pique Teas. Simon was born in Hong Kong and moved to the US as a teenager. He was educated at Harvard and Stanford, but after graduation he constantly had challenges with his health. This led to Simon traveling the world looking for answers, from the mountains of Tibet to the heart of Indonesia and the forests of the Pacific Northwest. He studied with the most accomplished masters in Eastern medicine and breathwork to heal himself and learn their art. Simon is a scholar in classical Chinese literature, a certified Qigong master, and a fanatic for all things plant and tea related and their impact on health and consciousness.
Hi, everybody. Simon Cheng is not only a very cool, highly educated man, he pioneered an amazing method of making tea that results in much higher nutrient retention and noticeably higher levels of life force energy. The first time I drank a sample of his Pique Teas, I was instantly impressed with the quality. I felt an immediate surge of life force energy go through my body as it entered my stomach, which isn't something I'd experienced from drinking tea in the past. In this highly informative, fun podcast, Simon shares the history of tea and gives many great suggestions for how to use tea to get the best long-term results, and how teas of different types can be used to prevent or aid healing from common challenges to our health and vitality, such as fatigue, low sex drive, and how to enhance your meditation practices. One of my favorite parts of the interview is when Simon shared the two main myths of how man started using teas. One of them comes from the Buddha himself, and it's quite a surprising story that you'll be reminded of every time you drink a cup of tea from now on, I can assure you that. I learned all sorts of cool things about tea that I didn't know, and I'm excited to share Simon's deep knowledge of tea and Pique Teas with all of you. They truly are the best tea company I've ever tried, and I drink Pique Teas regularly, particularly hibiscus, and you'll find out why in the interview. Enjoy Simon Cheng. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Living 4D with Paul Chek. Today, I have a great guest for you, Simon Cheng. I met Simon at Paleo FX, I believe, 2 or 3 years ago. And we hit it off and had some great conversations. Simon's the founder of Pique Tea, and he has designed and developed a very beautiful delivery system for his tea, which I'll let him tell you about as we roll into the podcast. But it's super cool. And the first time I tried Pique Teas, I was very surprised because the vitality and energy in his means of, I would call it crystallizing the teas. He'll let you know exactly how he does it, but it was profound. I mean, I'm a guy that drinks a lot of tea, and the first sip I took, I felt like I was drinking something that was quite vital and quite strong. So I naturally wanted to get a hold of some of his Pique Teas, and I have a whole bunch of them in my cupboard, and I use them regularly. Simon's also very well educated from Harvard and Stanford. He's a scholar in classical Chinese with focus on Taoism, Qigong, Tai Chi, and he's a certified Qigong master. So he's all around badass, cool guy with a lot of knowledge. And I really wanted to have a podcast about tea because tea is something that we've been drinking for probably as long as human beings have been around. So I thought, who better than Simon to inform us and educate us on all the cool things we can do to enhance our life with tea. So Simon, welcome to the podcast, and it's great to have you.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's you have a great memory, and indeed, we met a couple of years ago, and I remember your reaction after drinking Pique for the first time. I instantly knew that we would get along based on how sensitive you were to the energy in it. So it's great to be here, and I'm excited we're chatting.
Yeah, thank you. You know, it seems to me that human beings have been making teas for a very long time, and it's also apparent that their durability over time suggests that we humans have found them very useful. I'd love it if you can give us an overview of, well, first I wanted to find out, how did you get into the tea business? I mean, it's not really Chinese studies per se. It's not Taoism and Qigong. So how did you make that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like a lot of people that you interact with, Paul, I mean, I started a tea business largely because of my personal health experiences. I grew up in Hong Kong, which, some people may or may not know is actually ranked very highly actually in the last set of statistics that was launched by the World Bank and WHO, is ranked number one in longevity, in life expectancy in the world. And
wow, I didn't know that.
yeah, and this is very unusual because Hong Kong is a place that is a lot like Manhattan or London or any metropolitan city. So it's very very close living quarters. It's a high stress environment, very high GDP per capita. It's not somewhere you expect people to live long, healthy lives. And I grew up in this environment, and I attribute a lot of this to the incredibly kind of high level of refinement of cuisine that we have there. And just to give a little bit of historical context, Hong Kong was really kind of the center of trade in southern China for hundreds of years. A lot of very wealthy merchants. And during the Cultural Revolution in China, when everyone else was actually very poor and really struggling to actually feed themselves and make ends meet, Hong Kong was actually doing fabulously well as an economy. And its cuisine continued to develop during that 30, 40 years where the rest of China wasn't. And so we have this incredible integration of traditional Chinese medicine into our food, into our way of preparing food every day. And so any restaurant that you walk into, Cantonese restaurant will have a daily soup. And that soup is not like it's not like a tortilla soup or like or a chili. It's actually a set of it's always kind of collagen broth derived, first of all. So something, either a whole chicken or some sort of bone from an animal, be it a cow or pork, and then you balance that off with vegetables and medicinal plants that are du jour. I mean, literally, it's suited for whatever season we're in, and in that season, what the weather of that day is, whether it's humid and hot like it is in the summer, or it's cool and rainy in the winter. And the idea is that you're constantly rebalancing yourself using these medicinal plants, right? And of course, tea is a huge part of that as well. So every day you have these delicious foods and preparations involving medicinal plants, and throughout the day you drink tea, right? So even as an investment banker in Hong Kong, you go to your office, and when you sit down, the first thing that happens is that a tea lady or a tea gentleman, somebody that works there, just for serving tea, will come to your desk and fill your mug with tea. And everywhere you go, you're served tea. And so this was the context that I grew up in. And as you know, I spent most of my educational years in the U.S. When I came here, I very much checked into this system of kind of that programmed way of life and mindset of wanting to do all the right things, to excel in the right areas. In my junior year of college, I worked in investment banking at Merrill Lynch on Wall Street. And it's probably one of the worst summers experiences I've ever had in my life. 3 hours of sleep a night. In spite of that, I actually doubled down and spent another 10 years of my life in finance from the point that I graduated. And every year I would get different respiratory infections. So either my sinuses, my throat, or my lungs would get infected, or typically all three. So I was constantly on antibiotics, and then I would get skin problems. I got asthma, so I was on steroidal sprays, steroidal creams. It was just like endless rotating door through the doctor's office. And this went on for 10 years, and I was in complete oblivion. When people talk about becoming disassociated with their souls, I was so oblivious, I didn't even know that I was disassociated from anything, right? And so eventually both my lungs collapsed.
Wow.
I had to get operations in both my lungs, pleurodesis, where they staple up the holes, and then they abrase the lung wall and your chest wall so that it fuses together when it heals. And even then, it never occurred to me that there was something wrong with my life, right? Because doctors never told me that there was something wrong with my life. They, every time I went to the doctor, they'd be like, "Hey, take this, do that. Finish the course of antibiotics, you'll be fine." And I just, I was brought up to listen to the doctors and take everything that's prescribed, right? And so after the 2 surgeries, I went on with life. And then finally, when I turned 29, 30, I went to business school. I was at Stanford, and many people had told me that I had sleep apnea. No surprise, right? It's all respiratory, issues that I had. So I went to see the doctors at Stanford, which are meant to be amongst the best in the world. And they convinced me that, it was imperative that I get the surgery to fix my sleep apnea, because I had to, think about my love life. I was young. I wanted to travel and all these amazing things that was in store for me, that didn't involve having a CPAP machine, right, a sleeping aid. And I just took it hook, line, and sinker, right? I was like, these guys are the best. My God, they like practically invented this surgery. And now it's, now globally adopted. And so they were like, the success rates are, in the high 80s. It's going to be great. You're young. And I did it, and it was a total catastrophe. My sleep apnea was worse after I got a jawbone infection. So I had to be on 2.5 months of broad spectrum intravenous antibiotics. I had to quit my internship, fly back to Palo Alto, and get my jaw opened up. And the whole time I was like, jawbone infection. I was like, why is my jawbone infected? You never told me you're doing anything to my jawbone. And they're like, well, actually, when we said we would move your tongue out of the way, we actually cut a hole in your jawbone, took that piece of bone that we cut a hole around and pulled it out where it's connected to a ligament that's connected to your tongue, and then put it in place with a screw. So all of this happened without my knowledge, right? Explicit knowledge. And so that was, the final wake up moment for me, where I it was like a very rude awakening. I was shaken awoke. And I just looked back, evaluated, what I had been doing, where I was. I was like, I'm meant to be at the pinnacle of health. I celebrated my 30th birthday with a PICC line going into my heart valve for the antibiotics. And I said, something is wrong.
Yeah, I'll say.
And it was such, an awakening that it made me question everything, Paul. It was like the whole system, like the whole programming. It was like, this is like, I've been listening to doctors that are telling me the wrong thing. I've done a bunch of lies. Why am I doing this career that I don't even feel any fulfillment from? I mean, everything just broke down, right? And I got really into, I was already interested in meditation, but I got deeply into Qigong meditation because of the health benefits, and really went back to all of my roots with plants and their prophylactic effects, and healed myself. I literally traveled around the world finding doctors in TCM, in traditional Chinese medicine, in Qigong, in Tai Chi, and I went to study with them, and I went to learn from them and get healed by them. And it became such a big part of my identity, my practice, and my eventually my calling, that I decided that I had to start Pique, a tea company, to share what I learned with other people. It's just kind of discovering that compassion for wanting to share with others what I had benefited from.
Yeah, I'm curious. As a guy who grew up in China, why didn't you go see an Oriental medical doctor before you let them cut you open?
Honestly, I just didn't have the awareness of consciousness, Paul. I simply did not. I grew up, so I'm 42 this year, right? And my in my teens, I was, it was during the 80s. This was a time when there was a huge shift away from traditional Chinese medicine. I remember my grandparents saying that, hey, like, you can't rely on all these herbs and all this stuff. Like, you have to see the Western doctor. So my formative years were about Western medicine.
Wow.
Totally about Western medicine. I mean, you would never imagine going to see a Chinese doctor for sleep apnea. And this was 10, now 12, 13, 14 years ago, right? I just didn't have the awareness of the education.
I'm curious, what was your mental emotional state while you were doing all these intense periods of work, trading while you were going to school? In other words, when you were having all these respiratory tract infections and these health problems, what was your mental emotional experience? Not so much because you were getting sick, but with the work you were doing.
It was totally not related to the work I was doing. I couldn't relate it to anything. That's how numb I was. It was just total oblivion. I didn't attribute it to my career or my lifestyle choices.
Yeah, well, the reason I'm asking is because in traditional Chinese medicine, which I use all the time as a means of assessing patients, the negative emotion of the lungs, which triggers off all sorts of lung problems, is sadness and depression.
Yeah,
so
it's grief, right? Exactly.
Yeah, grief as well. I've had some profound cases of grief causing lung problems and all sorts of stuff. So typically when a person's moving in a path that isn't aligned with their soul, they end up having a lot of, first, usually anxiety leading to depression. And I was just wondering if you were having the sense that maybe you were in the wrong area of your life or moving in the wrong direction.
I did. I absolutely did. But the programming was so strong that it was very difficult for me to break out of it, or even come to terms with the depression and sadness that was obviously very, very, imminent in my psyche.
And also, the Chinese culture has quite a strong work ethic. I imagine maybe you felt like you just had to work through it.
Oh, completely. I mean, the people that are in finance in Hong Kong, I mean, is like the vast majority. The people that graduate from Harvard and want to go into investment banking or consulting back in my day, it's just like, it's what everybody did. And you're from Hong Kong, and, it's just like, it was like a no brainer. That's obviously, what you have to do as a career.
Isn't it beautiful, though, that your soul let the pain teacher guide you right back to where you were supposed to be?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, I'm grateful for two things. First of all, that I was so numb that, the pain wasn't more unbearable for me back in those days. It all just manifested in these health, problems, so very severe health problems. And the second thing is that, that was my life experience. None of this, what I'm doing now, would have been possible without that. So, the numbness as well as the opportunity that it created.
Yeah.
Worthwhile.
I was going to get into this a little later, but I think it might be fun to talk about it a little bit right now.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we're going to get into, the history of teas and the applications of teas, but the method that you use that makes Pique Tea so special is very different. It's not a bunch of loose dried herbs like a typical tea bag. Can you give us a little overview of what makes Pique Tea so unique, and what is it that you do to create them that makes them unique?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, we wanted to do tea because, in my mind, tea is the lowest common denominator. It's the thing that everybody drinks. It's the second most consumed beverage in the world. There are almost zero risks associated, and there's a whole lot of upside as far as health benefits go. The problem with tea is that you have to drink enough to experience health benefits. And this is something that a lot of people overlook, especially in non-tea drinking cultures like the US. So the research is basically that, you need about 2 to 3 cups of tea a day to experience any health benefits at a minimum, right? So that's roughly about 600 to 900 milligrams of catechins. Now, of course, that equates to different amounts of cups of tea, depending on what tea you're drinking. If you're going to, a diner and ordering iced tea, that's not going to have a whole lot of catechins, right? And so the challenge was, how do we get more people to experience the tremendous health benefits of tea through innovation? And that's how we came up with our product format, the tea crystals.
Organifi Balance is an excellent pre and probiotic with 7 different essential strains of pre and probiotics to enhance your microbiome, decrease gas and bloating, and support improved immune system and total body function. If you look at the research on the microbiome today, it's clear that the quality and balance of your gut bacteria impacts just about every function in your body. Each serving of Organifi Balance contains 20 billion colony-forming units, and that is guaranteed. It improves digestion and absorption of vitamins and minerals, and it boosts immune response. Simply add to water or any cold drink, or go the extra mile to enhance your health and vitality and add Organifi Balance to Organifi Green, Red, Gold, or Pure Juice mixes, or to an Organifi Complete Protein Shake to support your gut, immune system, metabolism, and experience total body satisfaction. Organifi makes being healthy quick and easy for the whole family. My family, friends, and clients all love Organifi, and I'm confident you will too. Living 4D listeners get 20% off Organifi products when entering the discount code capital C, capital H, capital E, capital K 20 during checkout. So go to Organifi.com, that's Organifi.com, to get your Organifi Balance and shop for all the great and easy-to-use nutrition products that your family needs.
And so what we do is we take the dry material, So what we do is we start with very, very high quality dry material. So, the tea leaves. And by that, I mean, obviously it's organic. We screen it for all sorts of toxins, heavy metals, pesticides, toxic mold. But also just kind of first flush. So only spring harvested tea, and then the baby leaves that are growing during the spring. So all these are very important parameters for catechin and polyphenol concentration. And then we take that dry material and we cold brew it, right? So we brew it at low temperature water, which is a very gentle extraction process. It takes a lot more time, but it results in less loss of active ingredients, right? So the flip side is that I could boil it for a very short time in 100 degree, in a full rapid boil and extract everything very quickly, but I would lose a whole bunch of stuff because of the heat, right? So we
Right, yeah.
of that. It's low temperature for long periods. So gentle extraction, full preservation of all active ingredients. And then after that, we get rid of the spent leaves, right? The spent material. And then you have this concentrated brew, which we then take 2 steps to dehydrate. The first one is a filtration process, where we actually filter out the water. So we get purified water as the byproduct, right? And then all of the solids and whatnot that are left are basically the dissolvable solids in tea. And then we subject that to a vacuum drying process. So we, in a vacuum, use a small amount of heat to evaporate away the water. Now, that's like bringing water to Mount Everest to boil. You can, you get a lot of boiling and steam, but the water doesn't really get hot, right? Because of the pressure. And that's what we do to get rid of the remaining water. What you're left with is this incredible tea crystal that is not just incredibly concentrated, it's also very bioavailable. It's extremely, it's totally full spectrum, right? So it's not like a catechin pill or an L-theanine pill or whatever, caffeine pill, which is very common these days and less effective. It's full spectrum and it's super bioavailable because when you prepare it, you're getting 100% of what was in those leaves. That incredible quality leaf. Not to mention, it takes no time to make, right? So, people are like, well, tea isn't that hard to make. Well, it's like, well, why do you drink tea bags as opposed to loose leaf tea? Tea bags are like, it's like the worst, right? The quality of tea in a tea bag is terrible. You do it to save time because it's convenient, right? Like, why wouldn't you drink a whole leaf tea if you want to, get the health benefits of tea? Well, the tea crystal is even easier. You can throw it in your water bottle, cold water, and you can have a loose leaf grade cup of tea. So there are benefits. It's concentrated, it's more pure, it's more accessible.
It's definitely more potent. I mean, I like we talked about earlier, I noticed it instantly. It was like, wow, whatever, this is not a normal tea experience. It's a lot more vital.
Yeah.
Just for the listeners, can you please explain what catechins are and polyphenols are?
Yeah, definitely. And I think vital is a good word, Paul. A lot of people say it's, they actually feel it's, high vibrational. I mean, a lot of people that are ultra sensitive to energy can just touch it and feel a difference. But basically, so, everyone knows what an antioxidant is, right?
Yeah.
Polyphenols are a different kind of terminology for an antioxidant. It's specifically a it's like a phytochemical that is in plants, right? So blueberries have polyphenols. Tea is one of the plants with the highest level of polyphenols in it, right? Of course, you're going to get something that's higher. Maybe a spice like sumac has more polyphenols, but it's not that easy to consume sumac, right? So tea,
no,
right? It's a great spice, but as far as its availability, tea is extraordinarily high. And so, in the class of polyphenols, the ones that are in tea are catechins on the one spectrum, which is in the green teas. You have a lot of catechins, okay, and that's further broken down into EG, CG, and EC and things like that, different types of catechins, right? And then you have in black teas called something called theaflavins. Okay, it's a different type of polyphenol. So this is, it's complex words. You can just, understand them as, they're green tea polyphenols, which are one kind, and black tea polyphenols, which are another kind. And this is fascinating thing about tea is because the catechins convert into theaflavins during the oxidative process, when green tea turns into black teas. Okay. And there's everything in between, right? So it's not just from green to black. You actually have white, green, oolong, a whole bunch, right? Before you get to black. And then you have the super fermented pu'er teas. So all along this entire spectrum, you have these polyphenols that are in different stages of fermentation, and they all have different health benefits. And they've been widely studied. And one of the nice things about tea is that it's actually one of the most widely studied, superfoods around, because 2/3 of the world drink tea every day, right? Including Japan, where a lot of health studies have been done on the population.
A couple of things. I think the typical American's exposure to tea is really just another caffeine delivery system. I don't think that on average, most Americans have really any consciousness of teas as medicinal. In my life as an American, I would say 99.9% of the tea drank is either just standard black tea that you'd get like iced tea, or green tea is fairly popular in the last 15 years, just because of the kind of health awareness of green tea. But my point there is that one of the reasons I wanted to share you on the podcast is because I really think particularly the Western audience is really not very dialed in to the benefits, the sort of the panoply, the medicine chest that teas provide. I think one of the things you mentioned earlier too is very important, and that is that to get the health benefits of teas, you have to consume them fairly regularly.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of people realize that.
No. I don't think, the vast majority of people realize that. And as you say, the experience of tea in the US it's alarmingly bad because of the prevalence of tea bags, right? So, a tea bag, which, you'd find for free in your hotel room, is like the equivalent of going to 7-Eleven and drinking like a 2-day-old coffee at a gas station.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
highly oxidized. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, you have that experience. You're not going to become a tea lover. You're not going to want to drink tea. You're not even going to want to finish the first cup that you made. And therefore, there's this very strong aversion to tea. And it's because fundamentally tea is not convenient to make. It's a pain in the ass to make. And tea bags are easy. And so that has led people away from enjoying tea to begin with. And then the other thing, as you say, is that I do think that people fully understand that tea is good for you. I don't think they may know specifically how and why, but they generally regard it as a healthy beverage. But in spite of that, a lot of Americans will think that I'm about to fall sick, or I have some sort of ailment. Let me go drink some tea now, or let me have a one of the sugared iced teas on the in the RTD aisle. The ready to drink bottle stuff, and doing something good for myself. And like I had my 1 cup of tea this month. That just
this month, yeah,
right?
Full of sugar, full of sugar,
full of sugar, and and that's that.
Yeah, the British culture has got definitely there's a tea culture in England, but I don't think it's the same orientation as it is in China.
It was actually when it first started. And then it became such a huge part of the lifestyle of the what it meant culturally to drink tea. And that is like, when you're upset, let's have a cup of tea. When someone comes to your home and you welcome them, let's have a cup of tea. And it just became this thing, oh my God, my nerves, I feel frazzled, let's have a cup of tea. It became this lifestyle thing where people just found reasons, or you have afternoon tea, which is a social event, and chit chat with your friends. It became this cultural thing. And largely, I have to say that, in the tea drinking countries, it is a cultural thing because it's part of the lifestyle, right? When people drink tea in Asia, they're not thinking, oh my God, like, the Japanese, they're not thinking, okay, I got to go and do this thing that's good for me. I think it's just part of, they go into a restaurant, it's there. They go to a vending machine, half of the options are non-sugared teas. People in China, they carry their tea around with them in a bottle.
Yeah. You said something earlier that I didn't realize. If I heard you right, you said what becomes black tea starts out as green tea. I thought they were completely different plants.
No, they're actually all from the tea tree Camellia sinensis, which is the Latin name for tea. And what happens to the tea plant is, it's much like the way when a leaf falls from a tree, it goes from being green and eventually turning black, right?
Right.
It's this process of fermentation and oxidation. That's basically green tea and black tea, the difference. Now, all along that spectrum, there's this kind of, highly evolved and very kind of ancient way of making all the different teas. And so, for example, some teas like, matcha, you would grind up into a powder, right? And then, some other types of teas like an oolong, you have to roll with your hands. Like if you took a leaf and you rolled it around and massage it with your hands, you'd break all the cellular walls of that leaf and cause a rapid oxidation process, right? And so there are all sorts of different ways to treat the leaves. And then eventually you want to lock in the oxidation to stop it, right? And that's when you freeze the tea in that state of oxidation. So normally you subject it to some sort of heat in order to lock it in. So after rolling it in your hands and getting it to oxidize, then you would subject it to heat, like a roasting. Then it's like, okay, you know what? That's it. It's done. Like, we've eliminated most of the enzymes and whatnot, and this is going to be steady state tea. There are different ways of dealing with it. Matcha is steam, for example, so it's locked into that very green, steady state.
Right. Now, in my experience, maybe I'm wrong, but don't black teas typically have higher caffeine content?
It's a super interesting question, Paul, because there is no right answer to this question. And the reason for that is because the green tea caffeine, and this is one of the magical things about tea. Caffeine in green tea is bound to the catechins to form a large compound, a large molecule, right? So you have caffeine, then you have the catechins, the antioxidants that I talked about. They're bound together, right? And there's this big molecule. And so when you ingest the tea, there's a time required for your body to metabolize that larger molecule. And it creates a time release effect of caffeine in tea.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and it's amazing, and it's typically it's about 3 to 4 hours in green tea. And so people always say, "Oh, when I drink tea, I have this sustained energy, this calm feeling, and I don't get jitters, I don't get this peak and this trough of energy of caffeine, right? And there's no spikes. The spike is what leads to the jitters and the anxiety, right? Is the cortisol excess. And you put butter in your coffee to level that off. And so in tea, it's bound to the catechins. In black tea, there are fewer catechins, right? Because catechins turn into something else. And so the black tea caffeine hits you faster.
That's interesting.
So, there's faster onset. Now, of course, some black teas do have more caffeine than green tea. Some also have less. It depends on the fermentation and oxidation. But generally speaking, it's just a slower onset for green teas than black.
Yeah, I think my biggest exposure to black tea is kind of the English breakfast, I think it's called, which is a very dark, quite potent tea.
Yeah.
And so most of my black tea has been that sort of style, and it's certainly got a very different effect on me than green tea. Right. You mentioned your matcha. You only started making your matcha tea fairly recently, right?
Yeah, it's been about maybe a year and a half. It's definitely one of our newer ones.
Yeah, I remember you sent me some to try. I love it. I actually still use it. I don't use too much anything with any kind of caffeine because my body doesn't like it. But if there's a day where I'm tired, I tend to get up at like 4 o'clock in the morning to get in here and do my research and stuff before people start distracting me. And and now that I've got the kids so close on our new property, I got to be even more careful to get up early before the kids are up, because otherwise it's, hard to stay focused. But the point I'm making is sometimes in the afternoon, like if I'm doing a podcast in the afternoon or something and I just need my brain a little more alert, I found your matcha tea is really good. It tastes very good too. And it's really got a very smooth energy. Like if I was to do a shot of espresso, for example, I would feel wired and tired. But when I use your matcha tea, I feel lifted. My mind is clear. And I actually feel like I'm getting nutrition out of it, not just stimulation.
Yes, definitely. A lot of people say that they feel nourished when they drink teas. And that has a lot to do with actually the appetite, sating effect of tea, which we will talk about later. The matcha is really unique. It's a very unique tea, and ours is especially unique. So matcha is a funny thing. We didn't talk about the history of tea, but matcha.
Well, let's do that. Yeah, we can go right into that next.
Yeah. Let's go into that next. So, matcha is a tea that's favored in Japan. It's a tea that was drank in China during the Tang Dynasty, like roughly 700 AD. And that's when there was a lot of cultural exchange, from China to Japan, including this kind of tradition of tea drinking. And the interesting thing about the way the Japanese like matcha is that they really like it to have an umami, kind of chicken soup, Parmesan cheese, like tomato ragu flavor. It's like a salty flavor that's like a little bit like soy sauce. Fermented foods have that flavor.
Yeah.
They will go through tremendous lengths to get that flavor out of a plant that that wouldn't normally happen. There's a lot of kind of manipulation. They feed it fish, which has umami flavor. They will shade the tree. So when you shade a tree, it stops photosynthesis, or at least it reduces it, right? And what happens during photosynthesis in tea plants is there's a conversion of amino acids into catechins, right? The catechins that we talked about. And so when you shade it, more amino acid is preserved, right? And those amino acids is what gives tea the umami flavor. It's like liquid aminos, right? It's like soy sauce. That's what gives the umami flavor. And so that amino acid has a taste. It also has a name, which is L-theanine. And you must be familiar with L-theanine, but a lot of athletes are becoming obsessed with it. They make it in a pill. L-theanine is only found in tea. No other plants or any foods have L-theanine. So it's all extracted from tea. So matcha has a very high level of amino acid called L-theanine because people initially like the flavor. But what we found now is a lot of studies have shown that L-theanine actually helps your brain generate alpha activity, right? Which is the activity that is generated when you're in the flow state, when you're in the kind of the doorway to meditation, when you're calm, when you're focused, when you're coasting. A wonderful state to be in, right? If only we could be in that state all day. Well, matcha actually helps you get there. And for the same reason, it's why monks like to drink matcha, Zen Buddhist monks, which are Japanese school. And our matcha, so our matcha was interesting when it launched because Japanese really cared about their teas having this kind of umami flavor. They cared a lot less about it being organic and it being pure and all these things, right? Because the people that lead the tea ceremonies in Japan, they're these very old school institutions, schools of tea ceremony. I mean, they're centuries old. And so they, target a flavor profile, a color profile, a frothy profile. They don't care about organic, right? And for us who are drinking tea, for health benefits, especially myself, organic was paramount. Like I didn't want to drink something that wasn't clean. And so created, we created the first organic ceremonial grade matcha. And then we also screened it for heavy metals, pesticides, and toxic mold, and also radioactive isotopes. So one of my paranoias of foods from Japan is just the radioactive just remnants, right, from the nuclear reactor.
Right.
Screen it for that, and also we harvest it from Kagoshima, which is at the southernmost tip of Japan. Our tea garden is actually next to the first national park ever designated in Japan. So it's just this very pristine, wonderful area.
That's awesome. Hi, everybody. My friends at Bioptimizers have formulated the most complete, potent, and first full-spectrum magnesium formula ever created. It's called Magnesium Breakthrough. If there's one mineral you should be worried about not getting enough, it's magnesium. Magnesium is the body's master mineral, providing over 300 critical reactions, including detoxification, fat metabolism, energy production, and even digestion is influenced by the presence of magnesium. But there are two big problems here. Magnesium has been largely missing from U.S. soils since the 1950s, and probably soils around the world wherever commercial farming is done, which explains why it's estimated that up to 80% of the population may be deficient in magnesium. Most magnesium supplements only contain 1 or 2 forms of magnesium, when in reality there are at least 7 your body needs and benefits from. If you take this later fact into consideration, it's logical to conclude that 99% of the population is likely to be deficient in 2 or more essential forms of magnesium. The good news is that when you do get all 7 forms of magnesium, pretty much every function in your body is upgraded, from your brain to your sleep to reducing pain and inflammation, and it all improves fast. The Bioptimizers formulation team even included trace amounts of something called monoatomic magnesium, which helps make all the other forms of magnesium more bioavailable. With Magnesium Breakthrough as part of your daily supplement routine, you are likely to reduce your stress levels and feel relaxed and at peace, boost your immune system, maintain optimal heart rhythm, sleep faster and deeper. Better sleep quality is a surefire way to reduce your stress and to enhance overall performance. Sleeping better and having all 7 forms of bioavailable magnesium to support your body is a great way to lower cortisol levels, which not only enhances cortisol melatonin balance, but people with adrenal exhaustion, often experiences chronically low energy levels, are likely to experience better short-term memory and improved cognitive performance as a result of enhancing their magnesium profile. And to my knowledge, Magnesium Breakthrough is the most complete magnesium supplement blend available. To get your Magnesium Breakthrough, go to bioptimizers.com/living4D. That's Bioptimizers, bioptimizers.com/living4d. And your checkout code for your 10% discount is all small case PAUL10 for your 10% off any order. Enjoy Magnesium Breakthrough, sleeping better, looking better, and feeling better.
Yeah, it's a really, I normally don't do well with stimulating teas, but it's really kind of counterintuitive that matcha tea that kind of picks you up and makes you more alert would actually take you into that flow state. I would have never expected that.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't recommend it more to try it out before you meditate. And, take half a bag or a third of a bag or, whatever, just do a tiny, maybe even just put a little bit in your mouth since you're so sensitive to it and let it, absorb, sublingually. I've noticed tremendous differences meditating with matcha and without.
That's very cool. I'm excited to try that. And it's fine just to drink it too, right?
Of course. Yeah, of course. Or
Yeah,
when
I'll
you
just
drink it. So a huge thing about matcha preparation, Paul, is that there's the water used for making matcha is generally much cooler than any other tea. So you almost want it to be lukewarm.
Oh,
Yeah, the lukewarm is actually what preserves that savory taste, right? It actually preserves most of the amino acids and the L-theanine. In fact, if you use hot water, it actually extracts more caffeine out of the powder. So not only does it taste worse, caffeine tastes bitter. Not only does it taste worse, it actually, gives you more caffeine than you want.
okay, that's good to know. That's a hell of a good tip. So
Yeah.
if I, because my kettle's not temperature adjustable, so well, actually, I do have a kettle that's temperature adjustable. I forgot it. It's got like 160, 145, 175, and boiling. What would be the best temperature? 145?
Yeah, exactly. So
Okay.
145, 130, 145. But you know what? Make life easier. Just put some cold water in there in your cup. Add the
Okay.
matcha in, and then after that, just add a splash or two of your boiling water.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, good.
That's way easier. I do that all the time.
I love it when I get to learn cool stuff that will enhance my life on a podcast. So thank you.
Well, I'm glad to be absurd.
Now, something that's interesting, you're talking about how the Japanese brought the L-theanine out of the tea and shaded the plants. This would have been done long before they were using standard scientific investigations and looking under microscopes. Mm-hmm. It's pretty wild how cultures through antiquity. I mean, think of how shaman came to the recipe to make ayahuasca with
Yeah.
no modern science, and many other native cultures made various combinations of plant medicines for various things. So it really goes a long way to show what observation and intuition can do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is actually tied into one of the origin myths of tea, Paul. There are two origin myths of how tea was discovered. And the first one was that it was discovered by this person called Emperor Shen Nong. Now, Shen Nong actually stands for, it means divine farmer in Chinese. Sometimes when I think of him, I think of my friend Paul Chek. So he was around 2700 BC. So this is like, close to 5,000 years ago, right? And obviously he's a mythical person. He was, rumored to have invented a lot of agricultural tools like the plow and things like that. But most famously, he is attributed to having identified all of the different usages for the different plants in traditional Chinese medicine because he experimented with them on himself, right?
Yeah, that's what I do all the time.
I know. I mean, he didn't have a volcano, so he just ingested them, right? He would just eat them and he would just take note of what was happening. There are also myths that he had a transparent body, right? Now, a lot of meditators are able to see inside their body, in a very high level of detail, their organ function, their meridian, all that stuff. So, it was rumored that he was able to see inside, and every plant he took, he would know, okay, this is the effect it's having on me. And the tea plant was the one that he noted as being the antidote for all of the plants that he ate that could have been, non-beneficial or toxic or poisonous. Tea kind of just fixed all of those things for him. And he noted that tea is just this very, very important plant in the compendium of materia medica, these herbs, right? So that's one. And he also came up with a whole bunch of TCM techniques. The other one is actually equally interesting, and it's that Gautama Buddha discovered tea while meditating, right? So this myth is, also, it's 2,500 years old, and the rumor has it that he had been in meditation for years, like 3 years or something, and then he fell asleep. So you can imagine how upset he was when, he woke up and he realized that he had broken this kind of, multi-year long meditation process by falling asleep. And, he was upset, and he cut off his eyelids and they fell to the ground, and they sprouted into a tea tree. And ever since then, ever since then, tea and meditation and Zen Buddhism has been, hand in hand. All Buddhism, not just Zen Buddhism, all across China and Tibet.
Yeah, there's actually a fair bit of psychedelic use in some circles of Buddhism too. I've got a great book called Zigzag Zen that documents the history of the use of psychedelics in Buddhism. And of course, like all camps, there's certainly some polarity between Buddhist scholars and practitioners. Some vary against the use of psychedelics for spiritual development, and many for it. But I just, that you just triggered my memory. It's a great book, Zigzag Zen, for those of you interested. I can't remember the author's name, but it's got a real wild looking cover on it, so you'll recognize it on Amazon.
Yeah.
You've triggered a question in me. This might be a bit deep, but I think you can handle these deep things. A myth, one of the definitions of a myth is a story that tells itself. What do you think the story that's telling itself is on the myths of tea?
The story that's telling itself.
If tea is telling us a story through a myth, what's the story?
Well, I mean, I think that certainly one of the stories is that there is this plant that is so easily accessible, that it has so little risk, but actually has such profound benefits. And that one of the, the insights is that, simple things, simple changes can often be the most powerful ones, right? I mean,
yes.
you look at, what's happening in nutritional, epidemiology, in the past 15 years, what do you think is the most important thing that's happened to dietary change to improve public health in the U.S. globally?
Probably eat real food.
It's even simpler than that. It's actually the legislation passed on trans fat and awareness about sugar, research done on
Right.
sugar. Both of these
Yeah.
were spearheaded by the Harvard School of Public Health, which I'm actually involved with. Uh, it's just like you can talk about MCT oil and ashwagandha and all this kind of stuff, but it's really the simple things that everyone can do very easily. It really makes a humongous difference. I think the second story is super interesting though, and I think that, and this is something that I believe in a lot. It's this concept that everything that you need is already inside, right?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, and so for me, when I look at these two myths, and I think a bit deeper, it's that yes, tea may have been the tool, but your knowledge that tea was possible was already there. It sprouted out of your eyelids, which was a part of you, right? You were able to notice the effects in your body because you could see into your body, and therefore it was already part of you. And so I think that to me and to Peak and to what I believe in is that everything is just it's through self investigation and awareness you can discover everything.
Yeah, it's interesting too because the myth and the story of the man that could see into himself, who did a lot of research on the plants and teas, it brings up two interesting points for me. One is in shamanic training, they have what's called the dieta, where, for example, if you go to a shaman, he might have you basically fast on nothing but tea made of tobacco for a month, or any given plant, or just eat that plant. Like I've got a tincture here given to me by a friend of mine who's been in training in the jungle for a couple of years now with a shaman. And one of the tinctures he gave me is cedar, and he had to do a cedar diet, and cedar's normally poisonous.
Right.
But they use this tincture. And so to make connection with the consciousness or the spirit of the plant, the shaman puts you on a dieta where you basically have nothing but that in your body, typically for anywhere from 2 weeks to a month, depending on what the substance is and who the shaman is.
Right.
So it really gives you a chance to basically engage the consciousness of that plant long enough to really learn to develop a relationship with it.
Mm-hmm.
And because each of these plants has a unique type of consciousness, you could say a unique form of awareness, when you ingest only that plant long enough, it begins to enhance that function within you or make you aware of how to use that capacity within yourself.
Wow, that's very cool. That's very cool. And probably connects you with all the other plants as well.
Well, all the plants, current research in biology and in plant science shows beyond a shadow of a doubt that plants and trees have very, very deep connections in their root systems, and they share resources, and a lot of them are harmonious for each other and supportive of each other.
Absolutely.
And actually, one of the ladies that I've been trying to interview, but the COVID thing blocked it. She was going to fly here she was coming from Australia. I'm brain farting on her name right now, but I'll think of it. If I think of it, I'll tell you. But Monica Gagliano, she's a scientist, and she was the first person to identify that plants actually can communicate through sound. And she used high-powered microphones and recorded that she was growing corn plants, and that they communicated by making clicking sounds, which is pretty wild. Almost like, how some blind people can use clicks like a sonar effect.
Yeah.
And she showed that they were communicating through these clicking sounds so that they actually even have a language. They talk to each other.
Yeah.
But the other thing that came up in my mind is, you're talking about how teas are quite non-invasive. They're not you're not going to get hurt by them if you drink too much per se. I mean, if you drink a lot of caffeine, you'll get buzzed, but in general, you're not going to get hurt from a tea. And so when you're talking about the Chinese man who looked into himself and tested all these teas, he's really practicing non-invasive holistic medicine. And the Hippocratic Oath that all physicians are supposed to, swear to is first do no harm.
Yes.
And so it's like we're in this drug-based culture where you take a drug for every damn symptom you have, right to video game. They even have drugs for video game addiction now.
Yeah.
And it's just like the whole kind of westernized allopathic medical concept has gotten so far from the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm. And this is one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, because I think if people realized that teas can actually be very medicinal, very nutritional, provide antioxidants, and give us, like you said, aids to meditation, aids to sleep, many of the things we're going to talk about in this podcast, I think a lot of people would be better off to just, and this is why I like essential oils and flower essences too, because they're very powerful, but not dangerous unless you're just stupid with things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if people learned how to use high quality organic teas like Pique Teas as preventative medicine or as a form of high performance nutrition like superfoods, that it might actually help them create a lot more durability and a lot more like core health.
What health? Cooler health?
Core health, like having your key needs met from, 6 foundation principles for me are nutrition, hydration, sleep, breathing, thinking, and movement. So those are the foundations of health from a holistic perspective. But if a person's using teas intelligently and regularly to supplement their diet and their lifestyle, it would add nutrition and it would add some of the aids that they need that we're going to talk about as different ways to use teas without having to reach for a drug. In other words, if you're having a hard time sleep, drink a tea first and give that a couple of days of try. And then if that doesn't work, then try something stronger, but don't start with a powerful medical drug that's going to throw your hormonal system out of balance and disrupt your dream cycle and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, just the disclaimers about the side effects of some of these, drugs. When you watch the advertisements on TV, is horrific.
It's a joke.
And that's an ad, right? I mean, imagine how these products are being presented in other avenues that are less, have a lower level of scrutiny. It's just, the same way that, I was pitched to do a surgery that was massively invasive.
Yes.
In retrospect, by the way, people now understand that have a 30% success rate is what the prevailing body of evidence has come to show. And not just that, the specific sleep center where I did my sleep diagnostic at is now well known to actually count many events that are not sleep apnea events as apneas, meaning that your score will always look worse when you do it there than it truly is.
Just as a little interjection here, I've worked with many cases of sleep apnea, and you know what the most common root cause I found to be involved is?
What's that? I'd love to know.
Food intolerance and food allergy. As soon as I clear people's diets up and figure out what they're reacting to and get that out of there, they sleep like a baby.
Oh my God. I have to come see you ASAP.
Paleo Valley makes some incredible superfood bars that are a lot different than what most people think of as a superfood bar. I've got Autumn Smith, the creator of their superfood bars, right here to tell you about them. Autumn, what is so unique about your awesome superfood bars?
Well, our superfood bars are unique because not only do they not contain refined sugar or GMOs or any of the freaky additives that you'll find in most bars or gluten or anything, but they're just whole foods. They're low in sugar. They're made with superfoods like ginger and broccoli and acerola cherry and collagen from grass-fed and finished animals, which we all know is like a fountain of youth. And so the best part about them, though, is probably the flavor. They come in chocolate and apple cinnamon, and we have so many more delicious flavors to come. And they're easy to put in your bag to feed for you with your kids. And I hope you love them all as much as I do. All you have to do to get access is go to paleovalley.com, and you can use the code CHECK15. That's lowercase CHEK 15, and you can get 15% off. And I hope you love them.
That's awesome. And just so you know, that's PALEO Valley.com. And I know you're going to love Autumn's superfood bars. So I would love it if did you give us as much of the history of teas as you wanted to there? I didn't know if we'd finished that or not.
Well, I'm still at 3,000 years from today, so there's a whole bunch more.
Bring us up to date.
Okay, let me bring us up to date. No, I
We
mean,
left off with Buddha.
well, I mean, there are basically two other notable things that happened, or maybe three. So, obviously in 700 AD was when matcha was brought to Japan. And then shortly after that, matcha was outlawed in China during the next dynasty. And it was, largely for political reasons, but also one of the reasons cited was that it just takes too long to whisk a bowl of matcha, right? And that was the excuse that was used. That's a funny factoid. And it wasn't until the 1600s, so 400 years ago, that the Dutch first brought tea to Europe. And that's the first time tea had left Asia. It's 400 years.
Wow.
And by the way, up till then, tea was not grown anywhere outside of China and Japan, right? This is very, very fascinating. It was a plant that was totally indigenous to China initially. In fact, the oldest tea tree today is 2,700 years old. There's a photo of me at it. Anytime somebody buys something from Pique, they get a thank you email with me in that tree in a photo. And then the next important thing that happened was that, the Europeans got addicted to tea, and we touched upon this a little bit, but they got addicted to the health effects of tea. Many people thought they couldn't go a day without drinking tea or they'd get ill. And then something happened economically, which is that Britain, the UK, became the biggest trader of tea, right? And they traded so much tea with China that they developed a trade deficit. Okay, and so all of their silver was going to China to pay for tea. And they came up with this brilliant idea that instead of trading their silver, they would start trading opium. And so opium started going into China, and tea started coming out of it, and trade was rebalanced again. Now, the only problem is that, opium was basically terrible, right? For it's not good for you to be addicted to opium. And so, 4 times over the course of 100 years, China tried to make opium illegal. So, basically from 1730 to 1830, over 100 years, they tried to make it illegal. And they failed. They didn't have enough power. They didn't have enough, they just didn't have enough control, and the government was super corrupt. And that's what led to the Opium War. Eventually, in 110 years later, they decided to seize all of the stores of opium and destroy it. And that's what
Where was the opium coming from? I missed that part.
It was mainly imported by the East India Company. So it was coming from that region. And so, the Brits were the ones that were trading it in. And so, the Chinese basically seized all of it and destroyed it. And in exchange for that, the UK basically attacked. They went to war.
I see. Okay, now I'm with you.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried opium in any form?
I have, actually. I smoked it when I was in college or high school. I can't remember. It's nice.
Well, you said it's nice?
I think it's quite nice, yeah.
When I was young, probably 19, there was for a period of time there, the Hells Angels were bringing opium-cured Thai weed from Thailand into British Columbia, and I managed to get my hands on I don't know, I got a hold of over a period of time. I probably bought 4 quarter ounces of it. It was really expensive. I think it was like $400 an ounce, which back when I was 19 would be like $1,500 today or something.
Yeah.
But me and some of my buddies were in heavy athletic training for boxing and martial arts, and I was heavy into cycling back then. But we used to smoke some opium cured Thai weed and go out and just have these most amazing cycling sessions. And sometimes after a hard workout, we would smoke it, and it would just be kind of an amazing combination of experiences of deep relaxation from the opium, but also very dreamy and kind of like take you into other worlds. And I was just curious if you'd ever tried it, because not that I'm encouraging people to find opium and try it, but I remember some of my friends that had gotten a hold of this stuff, and you could tell it was like, it was black like tar. The marijuana was caked in a tar, like almost like sticky hash.
Yeah.
And it had a unique smell to it, and it was really wild stuff. But
I remember it being a lot like hash, actually. The very kind of dark, gooey, but just deeper and a little bit more dreamy, as you say.
Yeah, so it's cool stuff. And opium was used in medical practices for a long time.
It was initially,
Yeah, until people got addicted too much.
Oh, yeah. Very, very addicted.
So, is there more on the history? I don't want to push you forward until we get...
That's it.
Yeah, that's really quite cool. One of the questions that came up, I wanted to ask you, it came up earlier, but I just realized I forgot to ask you. When you look at tea versus coffee, like drip coffee, which I don't like at all, but drip coffee is very similar to tea in its actual, it's liquid, it's like watery. How much of a distinction is there between tea and coffee? Is it just because coffee's coming from a bean and tea's coming from a leaf that's the difference?
Yeah, I would say that the effects of it are very different. So, coffee having the faster onset of caffeine, I find that it leads to, a much greater spike in energy, which, when overdone can certainly lead to
problems,
anxiety and whatnot. I used to drink 3 double espressos a day, by the way, during the 10 years I was in finance. And so,
that'll burn you out.
Yeah. That combined with the stress. And, I actually think that coffee and tea has some level of, if you can get used to the caffeine, there are some adaptogenic properties to it, because, a lot of, for example, in Britain, a lot of people will drink tea when they want to calm down. And this can be at any time of the day. It can be, in the evening, right? And then other people will drink tea to, get a rush, right? And some people will drink tea to meditate. And I feel like, it's the amino acids and some of the other compounds that really respond differently depending on, what state of, what emotional, mental state you're in, right? And does different things to bring you back to homeostasis. So, if you're super stressed out and you drink coffee, it doesn't have a calming effect. It makes things, in my experience, much worse, right? Like much, much worse. And as a baseline, it energizes you, but it can make things much worse. Whereas with tea, because of the L-theanine and the time release caffeine, it actually is able to calm you.
Yes. One of the things about coffee, whether it be espresso or drip coffee, it has a significantly more profound drying or yang effect on the body. It really is very, very problematic for females. It disrupts menstrual cycles like worse than anything I've ever seen as a therapist. And I almost always, when a woman comes to me, which is almost every one of them, has adrenal fatigue, and I got to get them off of coffee, and they're usually highly addicted. So one of my transitions, I create what I call a rainbow bridge, but I use various teas to get them to get some stimulation that's not so drying. But
yeah. A lot of people come to us to get off coffee, and we have a whole kind of protocol in place to help them bridge. Obviously, you need to taper, right? As with any kind of, addiction that you're trying to get off of, tapering is typically the better way to do it. Yeah, definitely. I mean, the adrenals and the cortisol from tea, coffee, caffeine is just not a good combination.
No, actually, I've talked about this in other podcasts, but I'll share it with you and for the listeners that may not have heard it. But I've had to go through caffeine withdrawal because I got to the point where even though I felt really tired and like I needed a cup of coffee or espresso really bad, I would drink it and I would feel worse. So that's how I knew that my body was rejecting it and I was stressing my body too much. And without a long explanation, getting off of caffeine from coffee can be a bitch of a process.
Yeah.
And my soul taught me a technique which works really well. I've never had it not work, and I'll tell it to you because it might be helpful for you to know. If you take a dozen of the darkest roasted coffee beans you can, because the darker the roast, the more caramelization you get. Therefore, the natural sugars make the bean more palatable. And you just take 12 beans and put them in your pocket. And whenever you're getting withdrawal symptoms, you just take 3 little beans, and you chew them and suck them and chew them and suck them as long as you can without swallowing the pulp. And that gives your body a homeopathic dose of the amino acids and the caffeine in the beans and tricks the body into thinking it's got its caffeine. And I once had a lady that was on 25 cups of coffee a day.
Oh my God.
And she had gotten so bad that her fingernails had fallen off, her eyebrows were gone, and her hair was falling out due to the degree of hypothyroidism she had pushed herself into.
Wow.
Because the more yang you push the body into, the more yin it's got to counterbalance. So hypothyroidism is a common side effect of a chronic adrenal fatigue. But this woman was able to go from 25 cups of coffee to 1 double shot Americano, so 2 shots of espresso in the cup filled with water. By eating the coffee beans, she was able to go from 25 cups of coffee to 1 double shot of espresso. And within about a week, she could get by just on the coffee beans. But she's the only person I've ever had that had to actually drink any coffee at all. And typically, I don't know of anyone that's needed more than 12 beans. When I hit my bottom with coffee, I was drinking a double shot of espresso in the morning and a double shot after lunch just to function because I was just pushing myself too hard. And I was able to get off without ever using more than 12 coffee beans. So it's a real nice, easy access tool that can be also added to your repertoire of transition if you need something like that.
Yeah, that's just such wonderful advice, because what a lot of people do instead is actually reach for sugar when they experience
Bad news.
the energy crash, right? And that's just like a huge negative spiral. It starts to affect your sleep, and your energy's down, then you need more coffee and you can't drink it, so you have more sugar. It's like a disaster.
Well, not only that, especially in this whole viral pandemic, there's a doctor named John Briefa from London, England, who wrote a book called Bodywise probably around 2005 or 6. And he was the first one I ever found citing research showing that 1 teaspoon of sugar can suppress the immune system for 6 hours. And since I've seen probably 2 or 3 other scientific studies basically showing exactly that. So when people start using sugar to compensate for low caffeine levels, they actually really can not only burn their adrenals out, but shut their immune system down if it's done with any regularity at all.
Right.
The other thing,
microbiome connection, right?
What's that?
I said that's probably a microbiome connection, right? I mean, the yeast basically goes into hyper overgrowth.
It can be that. There's a bunch of effects. I mean, Candace Pert said in her book, Molecules of Emotion, that based on her research, caffeine is as addictive as heroin and morphine and not caffeine, sugar, processed sugar, and should be classified as a type 1 drug.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to also add a little bit to is you talked about how people can drink things like matcha or green tea when they're really tired or adrenal exhausted and feel better and even sleep better. Typically what you'll find is when a person is adrenal fatigued, that if you use a stimulant like green tea, it actually brings their hormonal levels up to normal and helps regulate the system. But the problem is most people aren't sensitive enough or aware enough to know when they need to back it down so they don't get the opposite effect. But like you alluded to, it's helping bring homeostasis about in the body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One of the tests I do for people to help them know that is I say, if you go to the gym anytime after about 5 o'clock in the evening and do a hard workout and it enhances your sleep, it means your adrenals are fatigued, because the cortisol release from the exercise is actually bringing your cortisol levels up closer to normal. But if you go to the gym and work out real hard and it makes you harder to sleep, then you know that you actually have fairly healthy adrenals, because you're pushing your cortisol levels too high, which retards melatonin release and stops you from getting into deep sleep.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
So I'd love it if you could share what kinds of tea we can use to address some of the common ailments that we face today. And so I put a list together, which I shared with you there. So you ready to run through some of the common things so we can help people understand how to use teas to manage some of these things using the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the whole thing about tea is that, it supports your body's, natural functions, right? So your natural immune response, your natural digestive function, supports weight management, stress management. So the benefits are really quite far ranging.
Yeah.
Definitely happy to dive into some of these.
What are some of your suggestions for general stress management?
So stress management, a lot of this depends on what kind of caffeine you're on, right? So we talked extensively about coffee. Having tea as a replacement of coffee is a huge step forward in having better stress management. And the reason for that is simply because of the slower onset of caffeine, right? So not having the peaks, the troughs in energy. It's having the L-theanine, which has a very strong calming effect. And so the combination of those two things alone, a lot of people will report, instantly after drinking tea, that they feel more grounded, they feel more calm, they feel more relaxed, they feel more centered. And now, when you approach life in that state, as you would be very familiar with, Paul, if you meditate frequently, you're better able to, or if you do yoga consistently, you're better able to take on the challenges that life throws at you in a calm way, right? So
Yeah.
it's very different than if you're reacting with a high level of emotional fluctuation to the events in your life. So that alone is just, it sounds so simple, and it's just like, almost sounds like, this bullshit thing. But I mean, just imagine being able to be more calm, right? I mean, that's like the opposite of stress, right? And then
It's kind of the whole point of mindfulness too,
it's the whole point. It's the whole point. And then, what that does for your parasympathetic nervous system, which is related to every single organ function, right? I mean, it all starts with just having a better, cleaner kind of energy source. And so that obviously step one is super helpful. And plenty of people drink tea and, have that caffeine in it, and they're perfectly fine, right? It's just, it's and so with regard to specific teas, matcha obviously has a very high level of L-theanine, but I would say that really, and this is what's important for a lot of people, is that they'll go to matcha and they're like, oh well, I don't like the flavor, or this isn't enough caffeine, I'm not a tea drinker. There are so many different types of tea, many that actually resemble coffee in its flavor and its color, such as the deep dark teas, even English breakfast, that have actually similar caffeine profiles as coffee, that are much better choices for you, right? And so I would say that if, for stress management and you're trying to reduce caffeine from coffee, is like, go with something that suits your individual needs, right? Have a black tea in the morning if you want an energy boost, and then have a matcha in the afternoon. For a lot of people that drink coffee and love coffee, and there's nothing wrong with having anything in moderation, right? Just replacing an afternoon coffee with a matcha or a green tea is just goes very, very far in making a difference if you can incorporate it into your lifestyle.
Hi, everybody. I'm here to tell you about one of my favorite Symbiotica products called the Omega, and it is called the Omega because it's the Omega. So I've asked Shervin to come in and give us the lowdown on the Omega, and I can tell you before he starts talking about it, it tastes damn good and my kids love it. So Shervin, what's the Omega going to do to help any one of us that we need help with?
Well, there's so many things that once you take the omega that it immediately does in the body. But, let's focus a little bit on the astaxanthin that's in there.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, you've probably seen videos of me where, we have our astaxanthin facility outside of Reykjavik in Iceland, and that's where we grow that microalgae, and that's where we extract it as well. Astaxanthin is the strongest antioxidant in nature. We know that. And astaxanthin is nature's protector to outside energies. What's an outside energy? Oxidation,
right?
Sunlight, anything out there that can cause things to get old, to get withered down and break down. And it's the algae's protective force.
Right.
So we take on that energy along with omega-3 DHA, EPA. We also have organic sea buckthorn in there.
Right.
This is omega-3, 6, 7, and 9. So we're hitting it on all levels. We also put phosphatidylcholine in there, which bridges it all together. So with this product, you're getting full skin protection. You're getting brain protection, cognitive protection. You're getting all the things that you would need in an oil that's protective. So I look at the omega as a protective balancer for our modern lifestyle.
And I know Mana loves it. Is it good for kids at pretty much any age?
Absolutely. It's good for mothers. It's good for children. It's good for the elderly. This is universal.
And with all those fatty acids, it must be great for mothers that are breastfeeding.
Absolutely. I mean, this is what she'll pass on to the child, and she'll know where it comes from. It's not coming from China. It's coming from a wild heirloom strain in Nova Scotia. It's coming from Iceland. It's all cold pressed. It's the best ever. It's probably one of our best formulas.
I love it too. I feel it immediately when I put it in my body. So go to CYMBIOTIKA.com. That's symbiotica.com. On checkout, use the code capital C, capital H, capital E, capital K 15. That's check 15. While you're there, make sure you check out all their other products, and your 15% discount is across the board. If you have kids, or if you want just good general health, immune function, and just overall good vitality, go to the Omega.
How about teas made from herbs that are classified as adaptogens? That, because adaptogens are herbs for stress management. Are there adaptogenic teas that you know of, use, or suggest?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we have a reishi tea. So this is a mood regulating tea. We recommend drinking it in the evenings. So a lot of people will go home and have a glass of wine. Reishi is a wonderful, supplement or addition or replacement of that, because it will help regulate your mood. It will, basically make you more calm and peaceful. Obviously, it has a lot of revitalizing effects because it's, a powerful adaptogenic mushroom. And so that's a great one. Mint, something as simple as mint actually promotes calm. A lot of people drink it after dinner to help with their digestion. And again, it's like, what these plants do is they're going to help you reach homeostasis, right? If you've just eaten dinner and your body has a job to do of digestion, well, mint is actually going to support healthy digestion and support calm, right? So all those things are interrelated. It's not like, you take one thing for one problem and it doesn't affect anything else. Rooibos is another one. That's the South African, plant. Very, very commonly drank in the evening. And just, the smell of these teas is like aromatherapy, right? Mm-hmm. Every single one of these teas have evidence supporting its ability to promote calm.
How about ashwagandha? That's quite popular.
Yeah, that's a great one also. Ashwagandha is a very, very popular one for supporting calm. Yeah.
The whole thing with alcohol, I mean, as a therapist, I was and still am forever dealing with people drinking too much alcohol to manage stress. But one of the things a lot of people don't realize about alcohol, which I found in my research, two things I'll share. One, I found research in a comprehensive nutrition book. I'm trying to remember the name, but I got 2 or 3 editions of it in my library. It's like a nutrition almanac, but it's a kind of a medical grade nutrition book. But they showed that when people consume alcohol, it disrupts the Krebs cycle, and the alcohol skips several phases of the Krebs cycle, causing blood sugar to raise up faster than anything ever tested.
Wow.
So it's extremely disruptive to blood sugar handling.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it's theorized that one of the reasons that they give you bread and alcohol at restaurants is because it causes a huge blood sugar spike, followed shortly by a blood sugar crash. So they give you your alcohol and your bread, both high glycemic, and then they wait long enough. You know how you keep waiting for the waitress to come?
Yeah.
Well, one of the books I said that's a strategy, because by the time you come back, your blood sugar crashes and you order way more food than you normally would.
Yes. Another strategy that restaurants use is to put way too much salt in the food.
Yeah.
As a result, you're much more likely to drink, alcoholic beverages, which provide most of the margins for a restaurant.
Yes. The other thing that the physiology texts show that I've studied on alcohol is that every molecule of alcohol that enters your body takes 3 molecules of water with it when it leaves. So it's very dehydrating.
Yeah. I mean, talking about sleep apnea, alcohol is the one thing that just makes it, my sleep apnea go through the roof. If I've had a drink, it's just exponentially worse.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. How about teas we've talked about matcha and we've talked about green teas. Are there other teas you recommend for mental clarity and enhanced focus?
Yes. So, I mean, I think that the black teas, if you want a faster energy onset, the black teas are actually how I start my mornings every day. That's why I think the English, created English breakfast because of that effect. And again, some people may not want that, right? They want to have, if you're a painter or a musician, you may want a slower onset combined with the L-theanine, so you can be in that flow state. Generally speaking, the step change, you will certainly realize an incredible difference on the first sip you take. But the step change and a profound change happens when you start to use it for longer periods, even if it's a couple of days or a week or two. It's like, your response to stress changes. That's really powerful, Paul.
Yeah.
I mean,
how about Gyasa tea for mental clarity and focus? I find that actually quite friendly and not addictive. I've never had a problem with going into if I drink, my threshold for espresso is 1 shot. If I drink any more than that, the next day, if I don't have it, I feel like I'm having a withdrawal experience.
Right.
But I've never had that kind of withdrawal with Gyasa. Have you got any experience with Gyasa yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly drank it on numerous occasions. I haven't noticed the withdrawal effects, just given, I'm a regular tea drinker, so I haven't paid much attention to that.
I mean, for mental clarity and focus, I find it very
for
helpful.
mental clarity. I find that the L-theanine is really important to me. The calming effect is I certainly feel different when I get, the caffeine from Gyasa, but it's the L-theanine is something that I've come to really treasure. It's just kind of being in that mindful state.
Yeah. Another thing that I was given by my buddy Ryan Hughes, who's he was one of the top motocross racers in the world for many years, and he now coaches motocross all over the world. And he was traveling, I can't remember where he was, but he brought me back some coca leaf, which is in tea bags.
Mm.
And it was actually very, very good. A really nice lift, good mental clarity. I felt like I wanted to go lift weights on the stuff, but I never had any kind of withdrawal or anything from it. And I mean, it's the coca leaf that they make cocaine out of, but it was really lovely. I've never seen that sold anywhere over here.
I think it's illegal. I mean, people chew it when they're going up Machu Picchu, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it's legal.
He may have gotten it in Peru, actually, or he got it somewhere like that, and brought a big bag of it. It was in tea bags already. It was something that they just bought,
right,
right off the street there. But it's really kind of a cool experience. I still have some of it left, but it's probably like 8 years old now. So I think I threw it away when I moved to our new house. But it was a neat experience for sure.
Yeah.
So other teas that promote calm, anything else that you want to suggest that we haven't talked about? I know chamomile, for example, is a real famous one. I use it myself.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, chamomile, lavender, verbena.
Right.
Those are three of my, very, top favorite teas for calm.
What was the third one?
Verbena or verben.
Okay, yeah, I haven't used that one much. I don't
Very
think I'm
nice.
familiar with it.
Very nice. Yeah, you should try vaporizing that. It's so pleasant. It's very harmonious. Chamomile is, it's obviously very floral. It's even though it's slightly on the mild side. Verbena is it's a very, very balanced leaf, and it has very subtle floral notes. And it's extremely calming.
That's cool. How do you spell
Yeah.
it?
Verbena.
Oh, neato.
Yeah.
Sounds like a girl's name.
Yeah, yeah. They used to sell it there was a phenomenal source of it in the Bay Area that I found when I lived there. There was a woman in the East Bay in Berkeley who was growing it. I think it was like very small batch, almost like could have been biodynamic. Man, if I find that, I'm going to send some to you.
Oh, I'd love it. Yeah, I would absolutely love it. I'll have Penny have a look too and see if she can find some.
That one
How
will be
about teas?
great.
Yeah, how about teas that support emotional health? Like
very
emotional
similar.
stability.
Yeah, very similar. I mean, obviously the adaptogens stand out in this area, right? So the reishi in the evening. Chaga is a very good one for the daytime. It's another medicinal or adaptogenic mushroom, rather. Provides energy and can really also help regulate the mood, right? So it's like getting onto a program of this stuff where it's chaga in the morning, reishi in the evening, maybe a matcha in the afternoon. This will, I mean, it's going to be a step change, right? In kind of getting that functional support that your body could use to go back to homeostasis.
Yeah.
Our chaga is blended with ginseng, which is also energizing. American
What's
ginseng.
Blended with what?
So our chaga tea is actually blended with ginseng.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Ginseng's a super powerful herb. It's very yang.
Very yang. Very yang. The chaga is definitely a more yang, blend. The reishi is more yin.
How about teas for digestive challenges? Things that will support gut health, microbiome, and maybe helping make your bowel movements more regular.
Yeah, so this is a really, really fascinating topic. Teas are generally have really interesting interactions with your gut, right? And more kind of research and evidence is being, basically being published, literally, month by month right now. It turns out that the catechins and theaflavins in tea, the polyphenols, they're actually not very bioavailable. Meaning that your body doesn't absorb very much of it. What's happening in the interaction is that it's actually going into your intestine, and your microbiome is metabolizing those compounds into things that your body needs and uses. So it's actually the metabolites, the things that your microbiome has basically converted the polyphenols into, that are useful, right? Now, the other piece of very interesting, the research that's come out is that tea has shown an ability to support a healthy balance of microbiota. Okay, so it actually reduces the number of harmful bacteria, right, and increases the number of beneficial bacteria naturally. Okay, so
that's very good.
It's fantastic, right? So it actually dysbiosis, where there's an imbalance, is actually harmful, right? And so the way that I like to think about it is tea is like feeding a fertilizer or a soil or some kind of food and nutrient to your microbiome that it likes. So you're feeding it the right inputs so that it can thrive and be in balance, right? And
yeah.
that's an amazing thing, because the other way to improve your microbiome that a lot of people rely on are basically probiotics in a pill, right? And the
Yeah.
probiotics, you don't know if they're dead or alive, or if they're the right strains, and so on and so forth. The other good way to do it is to, eat a lot of fermented foods, right? Which is fantastic. Fermented.
That's what I do.
Yeah, exactly. And so tea is the liquid version of eating fermented foods. It's a fermented, it has that effect of feeding the right nutrients to your body. And we have a tea, the fermented pu'er tea, that's it's fermented. Okay. And so they're actually, it's in a continuous process of fermentation. So the microbes that were living on those tea leaves, when it was plucked from the tree, are still in that leaf, making it go from green to black, right? And when we crystallize it, there are still remnants of it, and you ingest it. And so you get that kind of prebiotic fertilizer effect, as well as the introduction of an interesting, strain of microbes.
I'd love it if you'd send me some of that to try. I'd love to try that.
I'm quite sure I have, but I'm absolutely going to send you more in case you maybe you got it mixed up with the other teas. We have so many now, but Paul, this tea is absolutely fascinating. You're going to love it. It's actually our pu'er teas are harvested from tea trees that are 250 years old on average. And
so they're wise.
They're wise. They're very wise, and they grow in a forest, wild, in a forest, right? And so
That's beautiful.
yeah, everyone has seen basically cornfields, right? Or tomato. And you go to any farm today, it's basically just all dirt, and then you have your monocropped, and then you have your mono cash crop, and then they're fungicides, herbicides, get rid of everything. Everything's dead except for your cash crop.
Yeah.
When you go to a forest, I mean, like, you literally need to use a machete to make your way to the tea tree. We have this in our website. You can see the video I visited. You need to cut your way through the bush to get to the tree. And all these things are dying and decomposing and enriching the microbiome of the soil. And the trees, because they're so old, they have these roots that grow very far down, right?
Yeah.
And so there's no issue with herbs and whatnot and weeds kind of fighting with it for nutrients, right? Because the roots are so strong, the trees are so healthy. It's completely symbiotic. And so just imagine the nutrient profile, the energy profile, the purity of a tea that's made from this kind of leaf, right? And that's what our pu'er teas are from. It's actually what I mostly drink. It's just, I find it so thrilling.
I've read a lot of books on the microbiome and interviewed Dr. Michael Ruscio on it, who's an expert on the microbiome. You're the first person I've ever heard mention the beneficial effects of tea for the microbiome. So that makes the podcast worth it right there.
Yeah, definitely. And there was a pretty well-known study done in UCLA on animals. It was mice that identify, and there are lots of studies that are similar to this. But basically, people that have that are obese, that have certain health issues, have similar strains of microbes in their gut, right? Meaning that there's a way to identify the presence of certain microbes in people suffering from obesity. And what they notice in these animal studies, and I'm going to just say this, much more research is needed. There isn't enough evidence to support any sort of health claim here. But what they notice in the animal studies is that tea has a way of supporting a healthier level of those bad microbes in animal studies.
Supporting the good ones, you mean?
Supporting the good ones and having less bad ones, basically.
Yeah. One thing I didn't put on our list, but it rises in my mind because it's a huge problem today, and especially when you listen to Zach Bush and holistic physicians, one of the common things about COVID is that the virus attaches itself to the microparticulates in the air, particularly in highly polluted cities where Zach Bush showed an overlay map of the world and showed that the highest level of COVID infection was in the cities with the highest amounts of air pollution and environmental pollution in general. So are there teas you can suggest for detoxification?
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that. I hadn't read that study, but the rates of COVID in Hong Kong has suddenly just completely exploded. And the summer months are actually when the air is very, very humid. I mean, it's exploded on an almost inexplicable level. It went from being one of the best the best at controlling it to just being completely, one of the worst. And so it's interesting to note that. And I think the winds during the summer also bring it can bring some microparticulates. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So the body has a natural detoxification process, right? And so teas can certainly support that. There are definitely studies that I would point people to with regard to pu'er teas and online. I can't talk about it because of FDA regulation. But there are a handful of in vitro and animal studies that show the ingestion of tea catechins and polyphenols are linked to suppress gluconeogenesis, lipogenesis, and lipolysis in a coordinated way, right? And so, those are all, obviously very good things for your metabolism. But again, it's just a lot more research is needed. It's completely hypothetical that there is a connection at all.
Yeah, I use a colon cleanse kit occasionally, and I give them to my patients quite frequently to help clean them out. But there's a tea that one of the companies provides, and I can't remember what's in it, or I would mention it. But it's to aid detoxification and to keep the bowel moving, because when you're killing parasites off, it can be quite poisonous to the body because you got all these dead organisms in you, and people can go through quite a detox experience and get quite sick.
Right.
But so I know there are teas that out there that aid for detox. I didn't put that on the list. I just threw it at you. So I was just curious.
I mean, one of the bifunctions of that is basically, having a regular pooping schedule, right? A lot of people,
of course, yeah.
This is something we talk about extensively, is that it takes you it doesn't take a second away from your day, a second of time away for you to look down at the toilet after you've taken a crap and have every single signal for your gut health looking back at you, right, as you're flushing the toilet.
Have you not seen my poopy policeman lineup in my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy?
Is it the Bristol stool chart? I haven't.
Hell no. It's my own lineup. No. I look in my book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. I show all the variations, common variations on poop, exactly what they mean and how to use a poop analysis. So I got that from Chinese medicine, but I built my own chart and had my artist create a beautiful chart called the Poopy Lineup.
Yeah.
And they look like they're in a police lineup when they're, like criminals. And I show the poopy policeman, which is the healthy one. He's dressed up as a cop.
That's hilarious.
And it shows what he looks like. And then it tells what a healthy poop should look like and how it should feel to have a bowel movement.
Oh my
and
God,
then I have Pellet Man. I have the bodybuilder. I have Diarella. I have the Olympic swimmer. And the book tells you exactly what it means if you're getting each of those poops and how to go about balancing it out.
Oh my God, that's hysterical. Yeah. I've definitely read your book. It must have been the wrong edition.
No, it's always been in there. That was right from the very beginning. But
hysterical.
I've had countless numbers of parents tell me their kids absolutely love that chart, and so they photocopy it and put it up right next to the toilet so that everybody can read their poops.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the first thing that a Chinese doctor will ask you, or if you have a baby or a pet like a dog, they can't speak to you. So you look at their poop every day, right? And it's just that people don't do that more. But tea absolutely helps you poop more regularly. So it's one of the things when people drink, it's like instantaneous. They feel like people have talked about it as a kind of like a very non-urgent type of facilitator, if you will.
Yeah, I think if I remember right, slippery elm tea made from slippery elm aids bowel movements. If I remember right.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a pretty. That one's very, very powerful, though, isn't it? I took that once.
I've used it, but I don't have problems with bowel movements unless I'm under a lot of stress or traveling on airplanes and I'm my rhythms are just thrown out of whack. But I rarely ever have to do anything. I mean, I've got my diet and lifestyle mastered. As you know, it's what I do for a living. So I don't deal with all these problems that people out there that don't know any better deal with. But I just, my memory bank was just threw it up on the screen there. So I thought I'd ask you about it. Did we talk about teas to enhance metabolism and support weight management? Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah, not really. I mean, maybe indirectly. So there are some effects on supporting healthy levels of ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone. And so, catechins and healthy levels of hunger hormone have, been observed together. And obviously, this is a good thing, especially for people who are fasting, because it helps manage your hunger cravings, right? It provides that satiety and that nourishment that we talked about. And so, for fasters or for people that are dieting, it's a great thing because tea is not only making it less likely that you'll want to eat something, right, because of the satiety. It also facilitates all the things that you want to achieve as a result of your fasting. So thermogenesis, burning basically stores of fat for fuel and energy. So that's certainly observed.
Yeah, I've used a variety of different teas when I fast to help stabilize blood sugar, and I think it's an extremely helpful thing that makes fasting a lot more tolerable. And because teas are so easy on the digestive system, it still gives your body quite a rest. There's a lot of benefits to that.
Right. We have a whole line of fasting teas. So some of the herbs that will be of interest to people are, we have an herbal fasting tea. So it's predominantly cinnamon.
Oh, good. Yeah, I love cinnamon.
Yeah, popular for fasting. And then that is combined with burdock root and mint. So, there's a story about mint. So the geishas of Japan used to chew on a mint leaf before, going to a meal. And it would help kind of, manage their appetite because it was regarded as being impolite to, eat too much.
Right.
You're accompanying, when you're, basically on the clock. And so that's one of them. That's an herbal one. So no caffeine. Actually, I should send that to you, Paul, if you don't have it. I think you'd like that a lot.
Yeah, I think all I've got left of your teas right now is a little bit of matcha, some of the hibiscus, which I really love. Right. Is there a specific application for hibiscus, by the way?
Hibiscus is great for digestion. It's beautifying. Cleopatra used to drink hibiscus to boost libido. There's I know a shop.
Oh.
Yeah,
I better check it out. I do drink it, but maybe I need to drink more.
Yeah. I mean, I have a friend who's a shaman who was he has an account of when he was a pharaoh or somebody who was in the pharaoh's court, and they would apparently drink hibiscus tea and just have these crazy orgies. And so that's definitely one. And then what else was I saying? Hibiscus. What were you asking about? I just forgot. So we have a mint that you like.
We were talking about teas for fasting, and then I just threw the hibiscus at you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I'll definitely send you all of our teas and the new ones. We have some really nice. Oh, so you haven't tried the puers yet? What a shame. I'll send those to you. And then by the way, we have two wonderful bergamot teas. So bergamot is another thing that people like to use in Italy in association with fasting. And we use whole ground bergamot, which is the rind of like a citrus-like fruit, and it's from Calabria, which is where bergamot is the origin of bergamot. So we actually get it from there, and we grind up the skin of it and mix it with tea. Very, very nice, slight bitter flavor.
I love exploring all these things. So anything that you want to inspire me to talk about, please do.
Absolutely. And on the sexual performance thing, the biggest one in TCM is cordyceps sinensis.
Okay.
Are you familiar with that one?
I'm familiar with cordyceps, but I don't know, is simensis the taxonomical name of it?
Yeah, well, this is a specific one, and it's not what's available. It's not what's available in the market. It looks so. It's called the caterpillar fungus, right? So,
Okay.
cordyceps is something that, kind of came to fame because, some Olympic athletes from China allegedly kind of use it, right? And, obviously a ton of gold awards. And totally allowed, by the way, because it's, a natural herb.
Yeah.
And so it was published in papers, and then some Western athletes started using it. And then, over time it's grown and grown. And now it's basically the most expensive herb by weight in the world. And extremely hard to get because it's wild. It grows wild in Tibet, in the Tibetan plateau. And what happens is, there's a little caterpillar crawling in the ground, underground, and a mushroom spore falls on it. Okay. And this spore will eventually, go and grow into this fungus that devours this poor little caterpillar.
Yes, I've heard of this. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it starts eating all its non-vital organs first, right? Because it wants to, have the caterpillar do its bidding. And then it
Yeah.
takes control of the caterpillar's brain
Right.
and gets it to crawl towards the surface of the earth, right below the surface, right? And then it finishes it off, kills its, eats its brain. And that's when the mushroom starts to grow out of its head. And it's like a little tall, little black stem that comes growing out. And it starts to fruit and expand, and then it bursts, and then, the spores fly all over the place in a new cycle of life. But, this herb it actually looks like a penis, and so has been used for, it must be 1,000 years now for libido, right? The Tibetans first discovered it, very, very precious herb. It's phenomenally hard to get and very expensive. It's obviously very widely available in Hong Kong and in parts of Asia, but it's just hard to get here.
But you have it.
I do have some. Mine is
Well,
done. I actually eat it every day. I'll send you some too.
Good. Well, yeah. If it's expensive, just tell me how much money to send you. I love trying stuff like that. So don't let the cost of it slow you down. I'll pay for it.
Okay, I'd be happy to do that. Mine is from Bhutan because I'm actually friends with a guy who collects it himself. So as you can imagine, it's so expensive that there's a lot of fakes and whatnot. And
right,
the Bhutanese stuff is potentially not as good as the Tibetan stuff, but at least I'm sure, like, I'm literally buying it from the guy who collects it. And so happy to send that to you. That's a really cool one. Really cool. And so a lot of people get confused. The cordyceps in the US, they call it cordyceps. In Asia, in Hong Kong, you're not allowed to call your product cordyceps unless it's cordyceps sinensis, which is the wild growing.
Well, that's good that they are regulating that.
Yeah.
I'm curious, have you ever seen studies looking at testosterone levels and cordyceps consumption? Because with all the low testosterone levels out there amongst men that aren't taking care of themselves and prefer to go to drug and hormones approaches, I'm wondering if cordyceps might be a natural testosterone booster.
I haven't looked at those studies, to be honest. There is much more related to the kind of the TCM approach, which is, the kidney deficiency, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I bet there are studies, though. I bet they're probably in Chinese. I'm happy to dig some up if you're interested.
I was just curious because you're much more in touch with that literature than I am. I'm focusing on many other things. That's why I like to talk to guys like you so I can get quickly educated and share it with the world.
Yeah.
Okay, so Simon, we've covered quite a bit, but I'm curious. You have more to share, I think, on teas as an aid to meditation, other than the fact that just drinking green tea helps put you in that sort of alpha flow state, if I remember that's what you said. So what would you like to add with regard to aiding meditation?
No, I think that pretty much covers it, Paul. If anything, breath work is a huge part of what we believe in and promote and try to educate people about at Pique. I just led a guided breath work practice that trained people or over a course of 7 days, help people achieve microcosmic orbit, which is a Qigong, process. And obviously tea was a very big part of that. And so, I was very, very pleased to be able to do it on Zoom with very large numbers of people and have, significant, over 75, 80% be able to go from not meditating to completing microcosmic orbit and reconnecting their ren and du meridians. So I think the two things go really hand in hand for me, is just kind of drink tea and breathe to unlock the ultimate kind of pinnacle of health.
When you say ren and du, is that synonymous with conception, vessel, and governing vessel?
Exactly.
Yeah, because I'm trained in medical qigong and practice all sorts of these things, so I just wanted to make sure we're speaking the same language.
Absolutely.
Was
That's
there anything
what ren and du translates into.
Oh, okay. Well, there we go.
Yeah.
And is there any teas other than using psilocybin mushrooms that give us a psychedelic effect that you know of?
No, I can't think of any off the top of my head other than that one.
I have a gift a friend brought me from, I think, Nepal.
Mm-hmm.
He brought me some very rare, hard to get honey that actually has a strong psychedelic effect. He told me if you eat 1 teaspoon of that tea and just go sit down and relax, you'll start having quite a noticeable psychedelic effect, which was quite cool. But that honey is not easy to get, and apparently there's a documentary showing how radically hard it is for them to harvest the stuff. But it just came to my mind because a lot of people like to put honey in tea.
Have you tried it yet?
No, I don't do well with honey at all. I've since I was a kid, I've had a real deep fungal infection, so I have to live on an antifungal diet. And if I want to really make myself uncomfortable, all I got to do is eat anything with honey in it.
Right. Well, send it over to me.
Well, I'll save it here for you. So I'll use it as a bait to get you down here. So
fair enough.
You bring some tea. I'll provide a vaporizer and some psychedelic honey, and
very good.
And we'll do some alchemy together.
Sounds like a great day.
Always. How about teas that you might consider helpful for spiritual development as a general theme, if there's something that you might suggest that we haven't talked about?
I don't think there's anything that we haven't covered yet, but suffice it to say that the two are very closely intertwined and interrelated. In no monastery of Buddhism or Taoism can you go to in this world and not find people drinking tea. And that says a lot, because Buddhist monks and nuns, they're meant to give up all attachments, right? So they give up their families, their careers, obviously their material things, but they're drinking tea all the time, every day, throughout the day. That says something.
One tea I'd like to ask you about, because it seems to have it's almost got like a, what do you call it? A panacea, something that can be used for a lot of things, and that's Tulsi tea. What are some of the benefits of Tulsi in your experience?
Yes, Tulsi is a great one, actually. I really like Tulsi. We've been playing around with it. It's an adaptogen. It's mood regulating. It's calming. There are some immune support benefits. It tastes nice. Ashwagandha doesn't taste very good, so that's very important. It's just very pleasant. I think it's easily accessible. You can find it organically. And so, it's kind of like a very good common denominator type adaptogenic plant.
How about moringa?
Moringa, I think people like it because of the it's like a plant food, right? It's almost like drinking actually it's a little bit like matcha, but it's almost like blending spinach and drinking it. I think that's also kind of like an antioxidant type product.
It seems to have a nice vitalizing effect. I drink Tulsi moringa tea in the morning fairly often, and it has no buzz like caffeine, but I don't really know how to describe it, except it's like how when you're in bed in the morning and the sun comes up, and when the light comes through the windows, it has a lifting and an awakening effect on you.
Yeah, totally.
That's what I feel like when I drink moringa. I've bought powdered moringa, and by itself, it's not as tasty as if it's mixed with another tea leaf of
Right.
some kind to give it some flavor. But it's definitely got some uplifting benefits. And I know I've done some reading on it, and they say it's a tea that people use for increased vigor, stamina, strength, and even anti-aging properties.
Yeah, and the chlorophyll is good for kind of detoxification as well, supporting the natural detox process. Um, yeah, I think with a lot of these plants, you really do get the energy through the polyphenols when you ingest them, and so
Yes.
a lot of them will provide you with that nourishing, revitalizing, rejuvenating property, right? And of course, they're all different in their own kind of like small degrees. Um, the more common ones, that is, and so it's like it's really cool to have this kind of refined quiver of like different arrows. I always think of all the different teas and plants as like a quiver of different arrows that I can use at different times for different purposes.
Yeah.
But just having all of these herbal plants at your fingertips is a really cool thing.
Yeah. Royal Lee in his research describes how a vitamin complex works. And he makes it very clear that a vitamin, there's no such thing as an isolated vitamin in nature, and that vitamins function in complexes that include proteins, fats, carbohydrates, minerals, trace minerals, phenolics, terpenes, and alkaloids.
Yeah.
Are there terpenes and alkaloids in teas? I've heard you talk about the phenolics.
I don't know if there are terpenes in tea. I honestly have not come across research about that. Yeah,
I was just curious.
yeah. It's yeah. That's a good question. I mean, amino acids is certainly one that I would add to that list as well.
Yeah, well, I said proteins, which
Right.
is amino acids.
Right. Yeah.
So, when with that knowledge, it makes me think that maybe when people are drinking teas, because most people's diets are so out of balance and there's so many vitamin blockers like caffeine and sugar are major blockers to the absorption of vitamins, that maybe the tea's actually enhancing the function of the vitamins in their body and allowing them to work better because it's giving them the components to activate the complexes.
Yeah, that could well be the case. I mean, optimizing your microbiome health is going to help with the absorption of everything that you put in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, it's been a fascinating discussion. I've really enjoyed it. You've taught me some cool things. I know you're going to make an offering to the listeners so they can get inspired to get some Pique Tea, which I highly recommend. It's really amazing stuff. And so what's the offer that you've got for our listeners?
Yes, definitely. So, we never discount our products, but for all listeners of Paul, and just being a huge fan, we're offering a 5% discount if you go to the page Pique Tea /check. And so that's spelled PIQUETEA.com /CHEK. And that's Pique as in pique your interest, PIQUETEA.com /check. The discount is automatically applied. And so get yourself some tea and enjoy.
Yeah, it's really. Why don't you just give us a quick listing of the different types of teas you have available, if you don't mind, Simon?
Yeah. Wow, we have a lot. So we have. I'll go through the different categories, right? So we have green teas, black teas, herbal teas, fasting teas, mushroom teas, and fermented teas. Now, the ones that I talked about from Pu'er, the 250-year-old tea trees, those are our our fermented teas. So we have a fermented green Pu'er or fermented black Pu'er. The fasting teas, we have 4 different blends. So we have an herbal fasting, which is the cinnamon burdock root one. We have a fasting matcha. The fasting matcha is all the ultra high indexing catechin teas, right? And so that's fasting matcha. It's basically, and then there's some mint in there. Every tea blend is very thoughtfully put together. The mint is to help your digestive system absorb and basically withstand all of those catechins. People love it. And then there's a fasting ginger. So a lot of people that start fasting have digestive kind of discomfort and so forth, and the fasting ginger is meant to help with that. And then we have a bergamot green fasting, a bergamot black fasting. So that's the kind of, a little bit bitter, the whole ground Calabrian bergamot. And then the two mushroom teas are the ones I mentioned. We have a reishi calming elixir, a chaga energy elixir for the evening and the morning, respectively. And then of the green teas, well, I'll go into the herbal teas. The herbal teas, we have a hibiscus, which is the one you love, Paul, for libido. We have a mint, which is a really fantastic mint from Washington State, beautiful, pristine origin. A ginger, digestion, phenomenal for digestive aid. And then we have a rooibos. And then the green teas, we also have an oolong tea, sacred lily oolong, which is kind of right in the middle of the spectrum of green and black. So for people that are looking for just that one tea to do it all, oolong is a great choice. Very, very balanced. And then we have a whole bunch of blacks and a whole bunch of greens, the kind of more standard, you think the jasmines and the senchas. Oh, and our matcha is, that's an all-time favorite for, the purest matcha out there. People
Yeah, I love
really
it.
dig it.
It's a very unique taste. It's actually quite, I don't really have a word for it, but when I first tried it, I thought, wow, I don't normally like a lot of these different teas that I try, but that one I found very unique. I found my body seemed to want some of it,
Yeah. We also have two fruit flavored teas that are really popular: a peach ginger black and a passion fruit green. People just like having the kind of fruitiness.
Yeah. Well, is that basically the options there?
There are more. I don't know if you want me to go through the whole list.
Well, I just want to make sure the listeners know what's available to them. Because we've talked a lot about these teas. I think it's if a person knows what's available, then they're more inspired to check it out. And I really want to encourage people to try these teas, because Pique Teas, I can promise you, they're a different experience. The vitality and the way that Simon's preserves them and crystallizes them is very special.
Yeah. So the English breakfast and Earl Grey are two good black teas for the mornings. And then there's also a mint sencha and a jasmine, tremendously popular teas. And the whole thing with tea is that the protocol is very important. Like, I recommend everyone trying black teas in the morning, green teas in the afternoon, and then an herbal tea at night. So that way you get your 3 cups or more a day, right? And it's so easy, it's enjoyable, it takes no time. You'll notice the effects right away. And you'll notice effects whether it's a second into it or a day into it, and then a week into it, 2 weeks into it. Like, different things start to happen to you as you phase yourself into these teas. But following that protocol is important, and we do a ton of education on our website.
I was going to say, there's places where you can go learn more about this?
Absolutely. There's a ton of education on our website. We have a blog. We have a whole tea drinking protocol. So sign up for our email list. You'll get the stuff sent to you automatically. And just having that knowledge of when to drink what tea is just, it goes so far in improving your experience, right? And it's like, now it should be, well understood that in order to benefit, it needs to be a part of your life. It's not like a once a week, once a month kind of deal. And so when you understand how other cultures, or how, predominantly even in America, how people do it, or in England, how they do it, it's, then you start to understand, it's like, oh my God, I love starting my morning with an English breakfast. Now I know why the Brits do that. Or, having your hibiscus at night. Well, we know why the Egyptians enjoyed that.
Yeah, well, we know why everybody that likes to make love would probably enjoy that.
Exactly.
Well, what a great conversation, and I'm really excited because I picked up some neat tips today and new concepts and learned a lot about tea. I hope everybody enjoyed it as much as I did. And it's lovely to know that we have a place we can get the best teas probably anywhere. I would imagine. I've never had teas better than yours.
Yep, I think so too. I think so too. And I'm very, very picky about what I eat and drink. It's been so much fun, Paul. Gosh, I wish we would do this more. And I'm very excited to visit you. Can I bring my dog,
whenever
by
you're
the
in.
way?
Yeah, you can. I'm allergic to dogs,
Oh,
but
no,
as
I
long
won't
as
bring her. Yeah, no.
it's what kind of dog is it?
Well, she's an Airedale Terrier, so she's technically hypoallergenic. But
Bring it. My Mana is driving us crazy for a dog. He wants a dog and a parrot. So
oh, really? Okay.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
we'll see. We'll see. But I'll definitely come. I'll definitely come myself, or maybe with my dog.
Yeah, well, I'd love it. So, all right. Well, listen, I'm going to close the podcast. I think we've covered everything we needed to cover. So, thank you, everybody, for listening. And remember, anytime you buy anything from our sponsors, you're supporting me so I can keep doing the research and all the work to get guests like Simon and help you learn all sorts of cool stuff like how amazing tea can be to enhance everything from sleep to mental clarity to meditation to spiritual development to gut health to sexual performance and more. So I look forward to sharing more with you soon. Lots of love. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you for listening to Living 4D with Paul Chek and today's guest, Simon Cheng. You can try Pique Tea for yourself, as Simon is offering a very special discount for listeners of this podcast. Go to piquetea.com/check today. That's piquetea.com/CHEK for 5% discount when you use the word check. They also offer a 30-day satisfaction guarantee, so your purchase is completely risk-free. Follow Paul on Instagram and Twitter at Living4D Podcast or on his YouTube podcast channel, youtube.com/Living4D with Paul Chek. Remember, you can watch more on Paul's blog at paulcheksblog.com and at the Chek Institute's new streaming media site, chekiva.com.